Hello, everyone. So, this is, I think, the last class, the live session for DE20, Design, Technology, and Innovation. So, I'll be covering the course material for week 8, and also I'll go over some of the previous assignments since I think the solution for those is now there on the platform. So, let's get started, and I'm just waiting for a few more people to join in, like in a few minutes. Um, and so I'll first start with the week 7 questions, and then I'll take up a few practice problems for week 8, which I have created. And as we go through, as we discuss the practice problems for week 8, we can, discuss some of the any doubts, questions you might have, or anything else in the assignment or any difficulty in the coursework. So yeah, so let's get started. I'm here. I'll just start speaking in a few minutes in case some people are joining in, then we'll take it from there. Okay, so let's start with the week 7 assignment, and then we can go from there to the week 8 content. So let me share my screen. Okay. So I hope everybody can see my screen now. So this is the week 7 assignment on the Swayam portal. So the solutions are now live on the portal. So question number 1. The question is, first is, which among the following innovations did Professor Chakrabarty mention in his module? So if you see, if you just, this is actually just right from the lectures itself. Like these are, like, some of these innovations he is just directly mentioned in the lecture itself, and this is like not something very deep or very complicated. He mentioned Purak, which is a prosthetic arm, and yeah, and he's mentioned the sickle innovations, in which he described how they went through the innovation process and everything. So this is just straight right out of the slides. So we can go to the next question. What is the issue with the first prototype of Purak, the smart prosthetics, when it comes to holding objects? Now, the question is, the options are: the prosthetics had poor grips and often objects fell on the ground. Second is, it did not understand the object's build and hence held them inappropriately. The third is, it had a faulty hinge on the thumb. The last is, after holding, Purak was not able to release the grip. So the correct answer, actually, Professor Chakrabarty has explained this in the lecture, that the smart prosthetic, it was actually not designed to understand the object's build. Like it did not work for objects which of all different types of build. So sometimes, like you need a different type of a grip to hold different types of objects. Like some objects you hold like this, some objects you hold like this. So he's explained this in the lecture, that you need to understand the type of grip required to hold each object, and that the first prototype of Purak, it did not sort of understand what type of a grip is required for what different types of objects, and that is why it was not able to actually hold each object appropriately. So that is the second question. Third is, why having more sensors and actuators not a solution to designing an intelligent prosthetic arm that can hold any kind of object? The options are, because having more sensors and actuators is like having many cooks spoiling the food. Second option is because multiple sensors and actuators take time in decision making, making the prosthetics slower. The third is because they made the arm heavy and clumsy. And the fourth is because there was not enough space inside the arm to accommodate multiple sensors and actuators. Now, see, the answer is, of course, given that it made the arm heavy and clumsy. So the difference between designing any product, like any everyday use product or any machine, versus designing a prosthetic arm in this case, is that there is a limitation on how how much stuff you can add to it. Because see, you already have an arm. The prosthetic is supposed to be a replacement for that. So you cannot make it of just any size, and you cannot make it of just any kind of weight. The number of sensors and actuators you actually put into a prosthetic is supposed to enable the arm to function like, to fulfill the normal body functions which the person would want to perform. But at the same time, it cannot be like, you cannot add so many sensors to it that it stops to, it starts to go out of spec for a prosthetic arm. So in this case, the sensors and actuators, or having this surplus of sensors and actuators, was not serving enough purpose, like it was not adding enough value to justify it into the arm, because it was making the arm heavy and clumsy. So I'm not saying that they were not adding value, but I'm just saying that, those, there would have to be another solution where those functions or that value can be added without increasing the number of sensors and actuators, and without making the arm more heavy and more difficult for the person to use. It needs to be user friendly. So if it's not user friendly, it does not serve the purpose actually. Okay. Next question is, what is the difference between domain knowledge and process knowledge? Now, the options are: domain knowledge is about the user's need, and process knowledge is about research methods to collect the domain knowledge. Second option is domain knowledge is about the user's real needs, and process knowledge is about users' aspirations. Third option is domain knowledge is about the user's aspirations and real needs, and process knowledge is about making these needs fulfilled. Fourth option is domain knowledge is about knowing a professional's expertise, and process knowledge is about that professional's soft skills. Okay, so this is a very good, a very interesting question, because I think many people get confused in this particular question. So the first thing is that within the scope of this course and this particular module, we're talking about domain knowledge and process knowledge as Professor Chakrabarty explains it in the lecture. If you go to a dictionary, or if you go to some other some other course, some other engineering course maybe, and there if you again come across this terminology, domain knowledge and process knowledge, it might mean something completely different. And it would, I'm not saying it would be wrong, I'm just saying it would be different because it would be defined in a certain context. So, that's kind of why a lot of people are, I think, getting confused about this, because these expressions, they have sort of been defined in the context of this particular lecture and this particular module. So don't confuse it with whatever else you may have studied somewhere else. So in the context of this module, this process of designing medical devices, what he's talked about is a domain knowledge. When he's used this term a bit repeatedly, what he's saying is that domain knowledge is about knowing the user's need, and process knowledge, what he is saying is that all the research and the methodology with which you actually collect the domain knowledge. Domain knowledge is like, if you're making something for a disabled person, then you understand everything about the life, about the lifestyle, about the pain points, about the constraints, about the requirements for that person. Whereas process knowledge is, all the ways in which you can collect, the relevant information, all the ways in which, and the methodology which you would use to get all that knowledge, to collect all that domain knowledge. So that is the difference he is talking about in his lecture. So the correct answer is, I think, option number one. Yeah, the correct answer is option number one. Okay, question number 5. What is the function of limit screw in the wheelchair designed for people with muscular dystrophy? So the options are: it limits the screw to come out of the shaft. Second is, it limits the screw to further revolve around the wheel. Third is, it limits the wheelchair to move ahead if an obstacle is sensed. Fourth is, it limits the seat rotation of the wheelchair. Now this is like basically this is a slightly technical question. So if you know that diagram where the limit screw is going, then you will understand that the answer is option number A, where it limits the screws to come out of the shaft. It's sort of a a mechanism designed to keep the screws within the shaft. So if you're not clear on this, it would be a good idea to go back and look at the diagram in which he has, I think, shown where the limit screw is going to fit. Okay, question number 6. What are the challenges while picking cotton? So the first option is cotton picking can be done only during a particular window of the day. Second is it is affected if there is dew or precipitation. Third is it requires heavy machineries. Fourth is it requires 6 months of training for a person to become perfect in cotton picking. Now, I think he's explained how one of the major challenges, not just in picking cotton, but even in designing something to pick cotton in the fields, is that cotton picking can be done. Firstly, only it's done only in the harvest season, which is a short, small window of time period within the year. But also, it is also done only in a certain window of the day. It's not like you can go and pick cotton at 2 in the night or something like that, right? So it has to be done within those certain hours when it is the best time of the day to pick cotton. And that is the other challenge when you're designing a device for picking cotton. The second option is also correct, where it says it is affected if there is dew or uh, precipitation, because if there is dew or precipitation or something, then the consistency or the nature of the cotton which is to be picked changes. The character of those materials, that whole cotton is different in character when there's dew or precipitation. So it's just different. So you have to account for that when you're designing a device which is meant to pick cotton. So the third is not correct because it does not require heavy machinery. And the fourth is also not correct because there is no such thing mentioned anywhere in the lecture that somebody should require so much of training or anything like that. So the correct answer is option 1 and option 2. Okay, so Ravi, question 7. Right. So how does Sickle Innovations manage to survive despite failing in providing a win-win situation in cotton picking business? So firstly, I just wanted to address this part where they failed in the cotton picking business. The reason why they failed was not because there was something wrong with the device. The device worked perfectly in the end after a few iterations, but it was more that they did not understand or they did not have a clear understanding of the whole ecosystem into which they were sort of launching their product. So they were launching the product for use by the farmer, but the benefit of using the product was not accruing to the farmer. So that is the reason why, in that, at least in that cotton picking business, the device did not actually work. It was not a success. Basically, the device worked, but the innovation or the business did not succeed because the farmers were not seeing the whole lot of benefit from using the device in terms of the money they made, basically. So then what they did was they came up with some other innovations, which eventually they did figure out the mistake or their lack of insight into the industry, or they found a better business model to tackle the industry. And so they came up with other innovations, which were all more focused on fruit picking and things like that. And it's kind of how they became successful. So the options for this question number 7, are Sickle Innovations expanded their vision to picking other fruits and vegetables. This is correct. They collaborated with political parties for promotion. So, as far as my knowledge goes, I don't think they did this. This is not mentioned anywhere in the lecture, or even if you go on the website for Sickle Innovations, this is not mentioned anywhere. So I'm going with this is not true. Third option is they introduced wire cutting mechanism to eliminate human efforts while picking fruits. This is correct. If you see the Skill Innovations website, you will be able to see that you can just check if it was there. Yeah. So this is the Skill Innovations website, and mhm. So see, this is some of the harvesting and pre-harvesting solutions. So they have the mango picker, apple picker, apricot picker, neem fruit harvester, sea buckthorn harvester, solar trap, transplanter, weeding tools, and saffron dryers. Let's go to this website. And this is another innovation by them, which is machine vision based grading solutions completely designed and developed in Indian market through our brand. So let's go here. All right. So if you see, these are all their new products which they have designed, and they're all kind of very reasonably priced. So if you see, this is the solar trap, which traps insects during the time at which they have to work or something like that. This is a vegetable transplanter, and this is a lemon picker. So you see, they came up with other products which are sort of which develop that concept further. Of creating fruit picking products which actually work for the farmers. So this is correct. They introduced wire cutting mechanism. Last is they began using AI and machine learning in their products. So I think this is true. They have started using some intelligent products in farming. Okay. Question 8. What is the significance of the 4 link rods as mentioned by Professor Chakraborty? Option number 1, the mechanism of 4 link rods can withstand more pressure. It can move more freely. It keeps the orientation of arm parallel. It prevents the arm from rotating in anti-clockwise direction. So the answer, it keeps the orientation of arm parallel. And if you see, this, he has spent a good 15-20 minutes explaining this functioning of how it is keeping the arm parallel. So if you go back to the diagram which Professor Chakraborty shares in the lecture, you can actually see how it is keeping the arm parallel. Okay, question number 9. Why does Professor Chakraborty emphasize on the business aspect of any innovation? Option 1, because the business aspect is like fuel to innovation. He says this in the lecture. So actually, I mean, you can see the solution that all 4 options are correct. So he has actually covered all this in I think in the later part of the lecture, where he said the business aspect makes the innovation sustainable because, of course, unless you have a steady stream of revenue, you can't really make the product more sustainable. Because the business aspect makes the innovation reach the society. Of course, unless the product is successful in a business setting in the market, it doesn't actually reach people, no matter how great your product might be. The last is because without the business aspect, no innovation can make an impact. Again, this is similar to what we just said. So question number 10. As per the lecture by Professor Chakrabarti, why was Purak, the prosthetic arm, such a successful innovation? So the answer options are: this prosthesis used only one actuator and reduced the cost significantly. Actually, this is this is the correct option. The next option is the prosthesis looked exactly like a human hand, hence users liked it. That's not true. Then the third is the prosthesis was designed by IIT Bombay, hence was instantly famous. No, that's not true because all the IITs and even IIT Bombay does design products which are not always instantly famous. The fourth is this prosthesis was novel in the market with no competitors. This is also not true because in the beginning of the lecture we actually discuss the competitors and the what they have been able to achieve and where they're lacking and how much they cost, all of those things. So um, you can actually find the correct answer even just by process of elimination. Like second is not true, third is not true, fourth is not true, so the first must be true. Although we already know that the first is true because this is one of the key aspects of the design of that prosthesis that they use only one actuator, and the one of the main design objectives was to reduce the cost drastically because the other products in the market and even imported products, they were all very expensive, so they would not really be affordable by the users, and they will not be they will not reach the masses anyway. So okay, so this covers assignment 7, which is week 7. So we'll take a short break here for 5 minutes or something. So we'll take a short break, and after the break, I will I will continue with the week 8, and we can discuss the practice problems which I've made for week 8 uh, after the discussion. Okay, so let's pick up from where we left. Now we can move on to week number 8, which is our last week in the course. So this week's practice questions will help us kind of get started with just discussing overall, uh, the whole course and everything, because I don't want to just repeat what is there in the lectures. It's just a little more helpful if we can go over it in the form of a question to see, if everything is clear. So let me share my screen with you. Okay. So I hope everybody can see my screen. Okay, so this week's content is about the smart cane, and Professor Rao explains how they came up with the whole smart cane, and where they started from, how they evolved, what was the design process like, what were the design considerations like, what were the challenges they faced, what are some of the other alternatives in the market. So he's explained, he's taken us through that entire process. So we can see whether, everything that we have actually, most of the things he says we have been kind of discussing repeatedly over and over in this course. And what he has done is that in this particular innovation, he has sort of explained those principles, those concepts in a real world setting, taking us with him through the entire design process. So let's go to question number 1. So the first question is, why did the innovators of the smart cane not want to use audio feedback in the cane? Check all the answers that apply. So first option is because in some situations it may not be possible for the user to hear the audio feedback. Second option is because disabled people do not like to draw attention to the fact that they are disabled. And the third is audio feedback was difficult to implement, and D is all of the above. Now, if you see in the lecture, what he has said is that first of all, like, in some settings, so the smart cane was meant to be like a disabled person's sort of companion or assistive technology, the term which he uses, in all sorts of situations. It's not something they use on like special occasions or something. It's something they use all the time to assist them through their basic functions and movements in life, right? It's not a specialized device or something, as in it's not specialized for use only in certain situations. It's meant to be used in all situations. And the moment we understand that, or we bring our scope of design to all situations, automatically we know that, that if you try to give some sort of an audio feedback, like like an alarm system or some sort of like an audio notification or something of that sort, we know that, in any kind of a noisy setting, like if they're in a very crowded place and there's a lot of traffic, even if they may not be in traffic, but if they're in a place where there may be a lot of traffic, even in that kind of a setting, audio feedback could just very easily be lost, and the person may not be able to hear the feedback at all. So, then in that case, your innovation doesn't work in some very serious settings. And of course, in the places like in traffic, or the person is even walking on the sidewalk in traffic, something like an audio alarm system not working is a serious risk. It's a very big risk to the disabled person, because that person is relying on that alarm system, right? So option A is correct, that it would not be possible for the user to hear the audio feedback all the time. Second is because disabled people do not like to draw attention to the fact that they're disabled. So if you have ever even lived with a disability temporarily, you would know that it's very awkward, it's very embarrassing, sometimes even very insulting when people treat you as disabled. And this is something which people who are not disabled very often fail to understand, that disabled people want to be treated as normal human beings. Yeah, they may need some help with things once in a while, but they don't want to be singled out. They don't want to be kind of, they don't want everyone to treat them as different. They don't want people to treat them as, well, anything other than normal. Because just because you're disabled doesn't mean you can't perform other functions which everybody else can perform. It's just that they have a disability with some particular thing. So, of course, disabled people do not like to draw attention to the fact that they're disabled. Like now, imagine you're sitting in a lecture or you're giving a seminar or you're, just walking through a very silent corridor and your buzzer goes off, like, like wah, 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 wah. Like maybe there's some object which it wants to warn you of, but you don't want to be the person whose buzzer or alarm is going off in certain situations and drawing unnecessary attention to yourself and to the fact that you're disabled. It can be very inconvenient and uncomfortable for the person. So option B is correct, and he's mentioned this in the lectures also. So A and B are definitely correct. Now C is not correct because this was not a constraint. They knew how to implement it. They knew how to implement an audio feedback in the design. So implementation was not the problem. It was more from the user usability and from the user perspective that this was sort of ruled out. So of course, because C is not correct, so D cannot be correct because all of the above cannot be correct. Second question is, what is the difference between a design and an innovation as per Professor Rao? So he has actually, explained this very nicely. Just give me a moment. Okay, so he has explained this very nicely in his lecture actually, where he says that, you can say that a design may or may not have takers, as in buyers, but there may not be a market for it. But if you say that an innovation does not have takers or does not have buyers, it sounds a little odd. So what he's trying to say when he says that is basically this, that design and innovation differ in that basic fundamental aspect. The design can be great, but an innovation is something which works in the market, which sells, or which has um, considered the usability and the purchasing power and the business model of the product. It's a product which is successful in the society. It is not just a design which functions on its own. It works um, technically and also in a business setting. So of course, A is correct, that design may or may not have takers. B is again for B is again directly taken from the lecture slide, actually, the lecture itself. He says they can find 200 ways in which a design won't work and fix 199 of them, but it can still fail. So this is what he's trying to say by saying this, is that, an innovation is one which has figured out the way it works. It's not just about finding ways, finding some of the ways to make it work, but it has fixed all the ways in which something may not work. That is when it is an innovation. C is an innovation, is a design that solves the problems of the users and the market. So it's correct. That's what we're trying to say. Understanding the problems in a product or solution and fixing them is innovation. So D is also correct. So you can say all of the above are correct because all the statements are actually correct. So E is the correct answer. So I'll be uploading the solution also for this in that shared folder. So please check the folder either tonight or maybe tomorrow morning. And um, I'll upload the solution file also because this is the last week. So I don't want to, give more time to uploading the solutions. I'll upload the practice problems as well as the solutions together. I will just suggest that, you first attempt the problems and then look at the solutions. Okay. So moving on, what is an incomplete innovation as per Professor Rao? So now what he is saying is that, in the process of innovation, of course, we always talk about failing and failing fast, and we talk about prototyping and all of that. But he has given a very unique, a very interesting approach to defining what is innovation. And that is that, so we'll come to that. So the option for question 3, the first option is that it is an innovation which has never been tested. Now, this is not what we are really talking about actually in the lecture. Like it's not, I mean, an innovation which has never been tested will not actually not be an innovation at all because you don't need to test it. So that is true, but that is not what he's talking about in the lecture. Second is it is an innovation which addresses only a small user segment. Now, this is also not true because actually your product may many times be designed very specifically to address a small user segment. Like in the case of the smart cane, for example, there are only like something like 5 million disabled people who need to use the smart cane. That's a small segment by, any way you do the calculations. So the fact that we are innovating for a small user segment is not what makes an innovation incomplete. We'll come to what makes it incomplete, but that is not it. So B is not correct. C is it is an innovation where some aspects of the failure of a product have not been addressed. So this is exactly what we are trying to discuss and why we are trying to emphasize the difference between a design and an innovation. So an innovation is something where you are fixing not just the flaws in the functioning or the internal working or something of the product, but also all the ways in which it can fail in a market, all the ways in which it can fail in its basic business model where the users are not even buying it, or it is not, maybe it's not accessible to the users at all. So even if it is in the market, it may even be affordable, but the users maybe don't know that it exists. The users don't know where to buy it, they don't know how to buy it, there's no way for them to have it shipped to them. So there can be many different types of issues in your business model. So an incomplete innovation is one which does not address these issues. So if you read the whole sentence, an incomplete innovation is an innovation where some aspects of failure of a product have not been addressed. So C is the correct answer. And all of the above and none of the above cannot be true. So D and E are not correct. Okay, moving on. Question number 4. Why is research to understand the users important for product innovation as per Professor Rao? So he has again explained this in great length. He's given a lot of examples about how the designers went to, the institutions for where the blind people actually learn, and where many of these places where they interact, things like that. So he's talked about many things here. Let's see which ones we are actually discussing right now. So the first is to understand the way the users will use the product. So before you can start to design a new product, which is sort of going to improve upon an existing product, you need to be very clear about the way in which users are using the existing product. Because, you may have designed the product to be used in a certain way, but are the users also using it in that way? That is a very big question. Because see, sometimes you design, I mean, okay, you take the example of this pencil. It was designed to be an instrument for writing, right? That was the purpose of this pencil. It's a very beautiful, it's a very sturdy, great pencil. But that's not the only thing I'm using it for. So whenever I need to open a bottle of some beverage or something, and it has that, that thing that, I don't know what it's called, that thing you peel off of a bottle, that plastic cover or something like that. I'm not able to open it many of the times. So I use the pencil without the lead to actually puncture it and to open it, right? So many times the product is used in ways in which the designer did not even envision it to be used. And it may be good or bad, by the way. Like, maybe a good improvement, it may not be a very good improvement. So it could go either way. But how the existing product in which is already being used by people in the market, how it is being used matters a lot. And for that reason, it is also important to understand the way users will use the product, right? And if you want to somehow change the way people use the product, the users, you know who your users are. But if you want to launch some product which is going to be very different from the way they are already using the existing product, then you are, like it's an uphill climb. Then, like Professor Rao discusses this in the lecture actually, that if you want to change user behavior and how they're using something, some product, you have to take a lot of care to add enough value in the product so that they can, so that they can actually modify the behavior and change the way they're using something. And we don't know what is that quantum of value add which will sort of justify or spur people into using the product in a different way. We don't know. We don't have any metrics of knowing that. That can only be done in a sort of like, field trial sort of a way. We can only do it by prototyping and testing with people, but at least at the initial design stage, you don't know how much value add you should do to improve a product so that the users can be somehow motivated to use it in a different way. So for example, like he's talking about going from the white cane to this ultrasound torch, right? So that torch is, of course, physically it's very different from a cane. And secondly, the cane can be used for many things, right? So like I'm just thinking on the top of my head, but like if there is some object, with the cane, you can just touch the object and get a sense of whether it is soft, whether it is hard, how big is it? Is it a stationary object? Is it a moving object? How far it is from the person? Is it close or is it far? You know, uh, is it an animal? Is it a building? Is it a stone? Is it a vehicle? So, just with touching objects with the cane, the user is able to get so much of information and um, so much of understanding of what they need to do, because they need to move according to that feedback, right? Now, with that ultrasound torch, for example, there's no way for them to directly get that feedback, right? I mean, we don't want to use audio feedback, but if you want, you can have different types of responses from the device, but it is not going to be, see, a device classifying something as hard and soft is not the same thing as you poking something with a cane and knowing whether it is hard or soft, right? Yeah, I'm not using a very a very formal language here, but I'm just giving an idea of what we really mean when we say that the cane gives a lot of information and how the way people use the product. So if we understand the basic fundamental idea of how people are using the product, we can actually come up with a device which carries all the good qualities of the existing product and makes it better. Because while you understanding the way in which people are using the product, you will sort of also pick up on what is not working for them, what is what is currently a challenge for them, or what is sort of like their wish list, something they wish they had but they don't have it in the current, they don't have it in the existing setup. So that uh, that kind of a feedback on the usage of existing products is also something you will not know unless you have directly interacted with people using the current product and watching them. So you see, some things people will tell you, that ye haath mein dard hota hai pakde hue, or something like that. Yeah, or the cane is starting to wear off in so much time, or whatever. I'm thinking out of the top of my head, but these are things maybe they will tell you. And there are some things you can understand by just observing people, right? You may see that a person is standing, leaning on the cane, maybe somewhere. And, maybe the cane is, I'm not saying this actually happens. I'm just giving a random example, perhaps. Maybe the cane is not able to take the entire weight of the person properly, right? Maybe there's some hmm, shaking or some slippage, or the person is not able to stand in a very stable way, something like that. So this is maybe a small thing which the person is not, not able to tell you, or may not remember to tell you, but you can learn by just watching people using it, just by watching people walking by, going about their daily road. Maybe you figure out that it's a little more tricky for them to climb steps with the cane, or maybe you may find that when they're walking on slippery ground, like if there's water on the floor or something like that, they may find it a little bit more difficult to walk on those places. So these are things which you may find while you observe. Or for example, like if it's instead of a full-grown adult, there may be a child who's using it, and for that child, of course, you need a different size of cane. So things like that. So there can be many things you learn just by looking at the people using it. And of course, the next level of learning happens when you actually talk to people and you actually understand how their perception is and how their experiences of using the existing product. So that's why I've highlighted this first point, that this is extremely important in any product innovation. B is to understand the constraints of the users. Now, when I say constraints, I'm not talking about just constraints in terms of just using the product, just to understand their lifestyle. For example, like, when you go into a shop to buy something, sometimes it may be difficult for the person to just even communicate something to, to the shopkeeper or to the person assisting them to buy something, right? So there may be some constraints they have, or they're not able to go into some aisle where there is less space for them to walk, things like that. So this may not be something which is absolutely directly related to usage of the cane, but just some of the constraints people have in their lives, right? Uh, you may also find that some people face some sort of a social stigma, and this is another constraint which they have, which may be very relevant when you're trying to design a product for that user group. So if they are facing like, some kind of a social stigma, then you will definitely not want to give some feature to the design which looks ridiculous or which makes them feel silly or something like that, right? So these are all very relevant points which are very, very important, especially when you're designing a product for a specialized kind of a need. And point number C is to understand the purchasing capacity of the users, which is of course very important, because like in this particular case, in the case of the smart cane, majority of the user group come from a financially weak background, which means they cannot afford uh, a cane which costs them thousands of bucks. Because see, a lot of these people, they don't actually, they're not able to get a job. They don't have steady stream of income. They don't have a way to they don't have enough money to just splurge on some device, things like that, right? So their financial constraint is important not just for them but for you as a person who is designing a product for them. Because even if the product is great, it's perfect, but if the person just cannot buy that product, and there is no other way for the person to buy that product, then your design doesn't really reach them anyway. So the design may not fail functionally, but it fails to reach the market, and it fails to reach the person who would use it, right? So purchasing capacity of the user is one of the first few things you need to know, because unless you know the purchasing capacity of the user, you cannot decide how to price your product. Or and if you cannot decide how to price your product, what kind of a business model to use to launch that product, you see a lot of the decisions in the design process itself depend on the pricing of the product. So whether I want to make a water bottle which costs 20 rupees or 200 rupees or 2000 rupees tells me a lot about what kind of a bottle I need to make. Not, I mean, not just in terms of its shape or size or something, but materials. What kind of materials do I need to put into it? How, how do I ensure the longevity of the product? N number of things like that. You can get design insights, not just the business model insight, but also design insights based on knowledge about the purchasing capacity of the users. And of course, D, to define the business model, which will work best for the target group. So for example, like in this case, they found that some of the users struggle to buy even the existing white cane, which costs maybe 200 rupees or something. So that is how difficult it is for them to take a buying decision like that. So you cannot, you cannot design a fancy smart cane which costs 1,500 bucks, which they can never buy, or which they need to to go into some sort of a financial arrangement to buy. What you can do, of course, is create a business model in which they maybe pay you some small amount every month, or in which you kind of give them a lease or rental, or in which you can get some sort of a subsidy from the government. So you have to work out the business model. But even with a business model which gives this flexibility, you still do need to reduce the um, manufacturing cost of the product, because you cannot design something for say 10,000 rupees and then go and try to get government subsidy or something. It you cannot get that subsidy, right? So um, so all of these are correct, A, B, C, D. So we can go with E, which is all of the above. So okay, so we'll just take a short 5-minute break here. I'm just, my throat is hurting a bit from talking for almost an hour. So I will be back in 5-10 minutes, and we can just pick it up from there. Okay, so let's continue where we left off. Going to share my screen. Okay, so hope all of you can see the screen. So we were on question number 5. Right, so let's move on. Let's go to question number 6. So this is a very interesting question because if you see throughout this entire course, actually, not just this particular module, but in this entire course, we have been talking about the stakeholders in the whole design process. And now in this particular, in this specific module, we're also talking about the stakeholders in the innovation process, right? So there's, of course, there's that slight difference between design process and innovation process. And that's kind of what I wanted to highlight here, that in this particular module, we talk about who are the stakeholders in the innovation process as per Professor Rao. And these are the options. So this is actually taken right from the slides. So if you have any confusions, you can go back and refer to the slides. This is, I think, the first part of the lecture. Let's go over each of these one by one. Okay, so the first is, of course, the users. They are, of course, the most important primary stakeholders. Then their caregivers and families. So, a lot of the times, I'm not talking about just the smart cane now, like whenever you're designing some assistive technology or some sort of a medical device, it's kind of important to talk to the caregivers and to the families of the person, of the final user, because they are the people who kind of watch the user use all these products through their different activities and through many kinds of troubles they might be having. They may be able to observe. So see, sometimes the user themselves may not want to accept or may even forget to tell you that they have a certain problem. And that can happen, that can happen with anyone, especially when somebody's sort of used to living a certain way, or they're um, used to things not really working. They may sometimes just take it for granted that ऐसे ही है, ऐसे ही होता है. You just have to work with it. You kind of forget to even observe and see that there is a fault in the way something functions. It can happen sometimes, right? That you just take something as given. But it is possible that their caregivers, their families, actually can point this out, that there is something about an existing product which is very difficult, or which is not as it should be. It's not ergonomic, maybe, or it is not fully fulfilling the requirements. Or it can also be, that you have given them some prototype, and the prototype is actually reducing the quality of the value add you want to do. Like, maybe the existing product was actually very good for them. And in the attempt to add some feature to to uh, your product, you have actually reduced the quality of maybe some other features in the product. And these kind of things, this kind of feedback is something we can best get from the users, the caregivers, the family, and the people who are either using the product directly or sort of involved, in the usage of the product on a daily basis. So the first stakeholder is, this group of users, caregivers, the friends and family of the person. When I say friends, I mean, because a lot of times it may not be the family. A lot of people don't have a very big family. So it could be the friends of that person who are actually helping him or her get through different issues they may have. So the second part is NGOs who are working with the disabled, especially now in this context, we mean we're designing something for uh, for disabled. So the thing is that NGOs who are working with disabled of a certain category, that is who you are designing the product for, they will have a very big knowledge pool, right? And why is that? Because if you see, like, there, if just for example sake, we take an NGO, say, for the blind. So, they would have dealt with, say, the blind community in cities, in villages, in different areas of the country, if it's a big enough NGO, and they would know what are the common issues the whole community as a whole faces. What are some of the other issues, like, it could be something like the flow of funds, or the kind of grants or donations they get, or the lack of research in that field, or the lack of interest on the part of, say, the governing bodies to provide support to those people. Or maybe they are getting support, but they're not getting the kind of support they actually want. For example, like, they may be wanting support for something else, but they're getting the support for something else. Now, this may seem like it's not particularly relevant for your design, but it's very relevant for your innovation. For if you want the product to be, your innovation to be successful in the market, you need to understand all the market dynamics. And that is where NGOs can perhaps be even more helpful than the users themselves, because the NGOs who work with a lot of people in your specific target group will be able to give you these kind of insights, which the users themselves may not be able to give you in as much detail, because these NGOs actually would have massive amounts of data. And when I say data, I'm using the word in a very loose sense. I don't mean like Excel sheets or something. They may have Excel sheets also, but I mean, like, they would have a very extensive knowledge about your target user group. So NGOs are definitely stakeholders. You definitely need to engage with them. If you're creating any kind of a product or design innovation for the target group, which that particular NGO has been working with. The third option is the government and government aided solutions. Now, see, the thing with the government and government aided solutions is that a lot of times the government aided solutions are not created keeping a lot of the existing problems in mind. They address some of the problems perhaps, and they may be giving you the very for like, they may be forming a very big base for the support the user group is getting as of now, but they may be lacking in some things, or they may just not know what they should be doing, what is the best way for them to invest that money or to distribute some funds. So that is where you need to take them you need to make them a part of your innovation process, so that, for example, like, I'm thinking out of the top of my head here, but in a product like a smart cane, for example, if you want to sort of subsidize the product, you need to convince the government and the government aided agencies that this is something which is actually going to really help that particular user group, and it's worthwhile for the government to fund you or to provide a subsidy on that particular product. So and when they are going to talk about, when they need to think about funding or subsidizing your product, funding part of it, for example, or covering part of your manufacturing costs, then they will obviously want to know whether the user is actually benefiting from it or not, and how much they're benefiting from it. Sorry, and things like that. So of course, government and government aided solutions definitely need to be involved. Okay, next is researchers and universities. Now, if you see, when we say researchers in our context, we're talking about designers also. So, like, in this context, we're talking about design research as well as, you can say, technological research. Both go hand in hand. So you see, like, a lot of the design improvements come from research. That is kind of how you actually create products which improve upon the existing, you know, existing status quo, existing technologies. So, for example, like in this case of the smart cane, they brought in a lot of technological additions, add-ons, you could say, to the simple standard white cane, which could actually improve the experience of the user a lot, right? So they use ultrasound and they use some way to charge the cane and things like that. So, there needs to be certain element of technological innovation, there needs to be certain element of design research, because that entire process we talked about of user immersion, of interacting with users, caregivers, all of that, that is that process is the design research. So, that is the role which researchers and universities play, which can actually make your product both technically as well as successful in the market. Right? Okay, so the next is uh, healthcare professionals, rehab specialists, training personnel. So in this particular case, there is not like, this is sort of assistive technology. So a healthcare practitioner is not directly involved. Like the people just buy the, sorry, they just buy the smart cane on their own. It's not something a healthcare practitioner is prescribing to them or something like that, right? So in this particular case, maybe the healthcare professional is not directly involved, but in many cases, they may be. So if you're designing, say, something for somebody who's diabetic or somebody who has heart condition or somebody who needs to use an artificial limb or somebody who has some other kind of a problem, like we were talking about muscular dystrophy in the uh, previous module. So when you're designing things like medical devices or things or some product for somebody with a very special kind of a condition or some specific um, health requirements, then you definitely need to talk to the concerned healthcare professional, because many times the users themselves will not know um, some medical or some of the technological aspects of a product, which only a healthcare professional can tell you. So they definitely have to be not just consulted, but made a stakeholder. We're talking about stakeholders here. They don't just need to be consulted, they need to be made a part of the whole design and innovation process. So rehab specialists are, they occupy a similar place as a healthcare professional, because in some kind of conditions, it may be the rehab specialist who can help you more, who will be able to tell you more about the patients, about them behaviorally, about their medical requirements, things like that. Then there is the training personnel. So, there needs to be some products will probably require like training for the users before they can actually start using it. So even in this case, like the smart cane, they require like 1 to 2 hours of training before they can start using the smart cane entirely on their own. So that training personnel also needs to be involved, because um, they would know what are some of the questions users will ask, or how to explain the features of the product to a user in the limited amount of time. Like they don't have an entire day to train them for things like that, and how to explain it in a way that the person can understand best, right? So if a person has, say, a vision disability or a listening disability or a cognition disability, then you need training personnel who can explain the features of a product, keeping those disabilities in mind, right? Okay, so next option is industry partners, and this is of course important for your market success, right? If you have an industry partner who is willing to support your product, or who is willing to take the product to the market, and who's willing to do all the heavy lifting for promoting the product perhaps, or for maybe funding the product, giving the seed funding for the product, things like that, then the industry partner definitely will be a stakeholder, not just an agency or something, but a stakeholder in your entire process. Okay, so let's move to the next question, which is, why was the color of the smart cane important? So now we can obviously see that the color of the smart cane is important to the people for reasons which a lot of times the people who don't have never really lived with any kind of a disability may not understand. you know so it is a more of a behavioral psychology kind of an understanding, but you can get it if you ever try to live with even a simple disability, even temporarily, right? Like, so if, for example, if you get an eye infection and you're not able to see for, say, a few days, that is like a temporary disability, right? So even if you have lived with a temporary disability for some time, you would understand why this um, question would annoy a person with a disability. So the first option itself is that the users did not like being treated like the color would not be important to them. So, like if you ask somebody, like, what color bottle do you want to have, water bottle, for example, and, like, uh, you're not asking them that. For a normal user, you would ask, what color water bottle do you want to buy, right? When you're designing a water bottle. But if you go to a blind person and you ask them, you don't even ask them which color they want, and instead you just say, why do you care what color it is? That is, firstly, that is very insulting, right? That is very rude, and it's very presumptuous, because you're not seeing the world the way they are seeing the world. So they may not be seeing the world with their eyes, but they have a mental image of the world. So it's not like they're not seeing the world, they are perceiving the world in other ways, and in their perception, they have certain ideas or personality or certain things they would want to convey to the world around them, right? So it's not like the color would not matter, because they they are still people, they still have certain preferences, they still have likes and dislikes, and they still are a part of the same society which you and I live in. So why should a color not be important to them just because they are not physically seeing it? Right? They know what yellow is, they know what black is. It's not that they don't know what it is, it's that they're not able to physically see it. So, anyway, so the first question is that the users did not like being treated, which is correct. Sorry, the first option, not question. The second option is that the users buy the product not just to look pleasing to themselves, but also to those around them. And this is, of course, correct, because this is what I was trying to convey, that, when they perceive the world, they're not just perceiving it for their own pleasure, but they exist as a part of that society, right? So nobody wants to look like something which is not a part of their personality, or which is not something which they would be okay with, right? I mean, just because I'm wearing a shirt and I can't see it doesn't mean the color of the shirt is not important to me, because it says something about me, about my personality, about whatever I want to convey. So whether it's a formal shirt, an informal shirt, whatever, right? So option B is correct. And C is a sort of like the same kind of, the color of the product would matter to the user, even if they can't see it, right? So the correct option is D, which is all of the above. Okay, so much more is left. Okay, let's go to question number 8. Okay, just before we go to question number 8, just give me a moment. There is something I wanted to share. Yeah, so just give me a moment. Okay, so next question is, yeah, okay. So question number 8 is, why was adding Braille to the cane not a good idea, to the smart cane? I mean, so the first option is there could be many different Brailles depending on the language, and there is no way to decide which one should be used. Now, this is of course a very pertinent point that they use the same six dot system, but it is essentially a different language altogether. And I thought this it would be a good idea to discuss this a bit visually. I'll come to that. I'll just share that for a minute in a minute. And let's come to the second point, which is the braille would need to go into the mold of the product as well for manufacturing. So what he explains in the lecture is that it's not just in the rapid prototyping when you're doing a 3D print or something, you can just print it directly. It does not matter just directly just printing the whole product. But when you're actually manufacturing, you need to implement it into the mold of the canes, right? So that itself is one more added feature which you would need to implement and may not be that easy to implement sometimes. The third point is that the braille is a 6 or 8 dot system, but it is different for every language. So unless the person knows which language it is, they can't use the cane properly. Now this and the first point are sort of similar. So this is kind of what I wanted to address. So let me share my screen. Okay, so now this is the Bharati Braille which I'm sharing about. You can just look it up on Wikipedia if you want. So basically, if you see, so a lot of the Indian languages have very similar sounds and similar vowels, similar kind of words. I mean, some languages, of course, have additional vowels, additional consonants, additional different systems, but some of them are sort of similar. So if you see that what they have tried to do in the Bharatiya Braille is that like they all have the same Braille, the same code. It's a 6 dot system, and there's a specific combination of dots which signals, which implies this particular sound. So if the single dot, it's a. If it's this particular combination, it is a. If it is e, small e, it is this. Is e, it is this. So when you look at this, it seems as if the braille is the same for all the languages. No, that's what it looks like, right? Because all the languages have the same sound, the same braille for the same sound. What's the catch here then? Then why are we saying that the braille is different for different languages? Any thoughts? See here also k, kh, g, gh, yeah, they have similar code. Now, if you want to call it the braille code or script, the script for the braille is the same. Here, ch, ch, j, jh, ra. This is the braille in all these languages. There's Gurmukhi, Urdu, Devanagari, Gujarati, Bengali, Diya, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, Tamil. So they all have some sounds may be missing in some languages, like ch and jh are missing in Tamil. You can see na is missing in Urdu. So all these languages have the same code. Otherwise, the are all missing. There's only the in Tamil. Sorry, the are all missing in Tamil. Right, so this is the braille. Now, what we mean when we say that braille is different for different languages, so what we mean to say is that you have the same code for the same sound, but that particular combination of sounds means different in things in different languages, right? is if I write a and ma in Braille, it is a and ma. But a and ma are different in Hindi and are different in Bengali. Or I'm just saying Bengali out of the top of my head, but you could take any Telugu, Malayalam, Kannada, Udiya, Gujarati. So, that word you're forming with the Braille, say suppose I'm just saying ma, that word or that code in Braille could mean something completely nonsensical in Bengali and something completely sensical in Hindi, right? So if you want to say turn this on or this is on and this is off, the word for on and the word for off will be different in Hindi, in Bengali, in Tamil, in Telugu, and so on and so forth, right? So when I say, I hope you understood what I'm trying to say. So the code in Braille for the exact sound is the same in the different languages, but the word for something, the word for say, 1 meter or on and off or danger, the word for that, what you want to convey, is different in different languages, and hence the Braille should be different in different languages. It cannot be the same Braille, which is why we are trying to say that if you want to make a smart cane which has Braille on it as a tactile feedback, then you will need to consider making the cane for many different languages, not just one Braille. You cannot use just one Braille as a universal Braille for the smart cane. So this is sort of what I wanted to explain a little bit. Now, similarly, if you see, this is open the Devanagari Braille here. This is the Devanagari Braille, and it is kind of similar in some other languages. Right? Sanskrit, Hindi, Marathi, Nepali are kind of similar in Braille, but it would be different for other languages. Right? So this is sort of the bigger point I wanted to convey. Okay, let's go back to our questions. All right, so let's go to question number 9. Just give me a moment. Okay, question number 9. Sorry, this is not this is they, the spelling mistake, or it's a typo. I'll correct it in the file I upload. Where did they eventually use Braille in the Smart Pin product? No, the options are, the first option is the use Braille in the buttons. Second is the use Braille in the tactile feedback. Sorry, say the use Braille in the user manual in multiple languages. D is the use Braille in the user manuals in a single language. E is the do not use Braille. Now, this is actually my favorite question in this entire practice problem set. So I'll give you a few minutes to think about this question. Just if you've gone through the coursework, you will know, which answer is correct, but I'll just give you a moment to think. If you know the answer, you can just type into the chat box. Okay. So any ideas? Okay. All right. So what happens here is that they do not use Braille in the buttons. We discussed that already. And they also do not use Braille in the tactile feedback because we just discussed that, it's not possible to implement Braille in multiple languages in the feedback. What they do use Braille for is in the user manuals. Now, in the user manuals, again, we have the same thing that, we have users from all different parts of the country. So which language do you use? So a user manual is not like, something which is so difficult or something so implement or something so difficult to print that you cannot implement it in multiple languages, which is um, which is kind of why they actually use Braille in multiple languages in the user manuals. And in this case, the Braille is sort of like a user manual, sorry, not the Braille. The user manual is very much important in the product because this is kind of product which, if not used in the correct setting or which is, if it is not used in the proper way, then it can actually be a big risk to the user. So it's important for legal as well as for information purposes that they explain this very properly in the user manuals. And as such, the user manual is sort of like a part of your offering. It's a part of your product which you give to the user. So they have to explain it in the training session also, but still, it still does need to go into the user manual in a very clear and very explicit way. So unlike many times where the user just throws the user manual out, in this particular case, the user manual actually carries important instructions for the users. So in this case, they actually create user manuals in multiple languages in Braille. And of course, E is not correct because they do use Braille in the user languages. So Braille is very much used. The last question here is why was an electrical engineer important in the design team for the smart cane? Now he discusses this part where we are talking about how they actually have a very interdisciplinary design team, and that is kind of why the product is successful in the design phase itself. It is sort of making sense because what we talk about, I'll come to it in a bit, is that the role different people in that team actually play matters a lot in the technological innovations they've added in the smart game. So the A option is correct, where it says the design required a multidisciplinary team which addresses different features of the game. So they're able to add new features and additional features to the cane because they had a multidisciplinary team which brought in their own domain knowledge and implemented that in the product. In option B says that the electrical engineers made sure that the smart cane does not require charging too frequently. This is correct because the electrical engineers were the ones who actually ensured that the product is such that they can charge it once for 2-3 hours, I think, and then they don't have to charge it for an entire fortnight. So that's a big relief to the users because it's a hassle to keep charging something you're using the entire day. Right. See, the engineers have been adding power buttons to the cane. So this is not correct. I added this mainly to check if people are actually paying attention because for adding power buttons alone to the cane, they did not, I mean, they may have helped, but that was not like the key, um, the key contribution of electrical engineers there. And the D option is none of the above. So that is not true. So, okay, so here we kind of finished the practice problem set, and I'm going to upload this in the same shared folder where you have all the rest of the materials, and I'll upload the solution as well. It's pretty straightforward. I've already discussed the solutions in the class, so I think the solutions should I mean, they're kind of redundant, but still for anybody else who wants to still go back and refer to the solutions, something like that. So as always, like, I mean, I know you guys have your, I think, your final exam in a week or 2 weeks or something like that. I'm sorry, I forgot the exact date of the exam, but just some like basic things. I know that I mean, I'm not a part of the content or the exam team, so I don't know what kind of an exam you guys will be getting. But if there are some questions from the entire course material, the 8 weeks, and you want me to address them, please post it in the, in the live discussion page. So if you see the Swayam portal, there is a live discussion where it says ask a question. So that is a discussion forum for that particular course itself. So in that discussion forum, you can post your questions and either me or the content team will attempt to answer them to you. And if there is something which you have not understood from the course, I would suggest you go back to, like, of course you have the lecture videos and lecture slides, but also please go back to some of the live sessions from the previous weeks in which I have actually explained a lot of the things from the course material, and some people may have asked questions in the class also. So you may have the benefit of having somebody else ask me that question already in the class and I may have answered it. No. So do that. And if the question is still unanswered, and if live discussion is also not helpful, at least post your question over there so I know that you require an answer to this. And I will try to, do a review video and upload it to the same place where I upload my videos normally. So I guess I think this is the last live session for this particular course. It was a really great course, and I'm really happy that I was able to be the TA for this particular course. And I hope you guys got some value, some help from these live sessions. If you did, please do do share that in the feedback forms. Even if you feel like there was something lacking in the video sessions, please do mention that. I would really want to know how what your experience was like. And if there is anything new you want included in the live session, like so far we have mainly discussed practice problems in live sessions, because that is kind of where most people struggle a little bit, or that is kind of where most people want more help. Like, they want to know what else. It's kind of a way to prepare better for the exams or to answer questions on the practice, on the assignments. So that's kind of the format I chose for that reason. But if there is something else you want discussed in the classes, um, please do share that. Even if I'm not the TA for the course the next time, that can still be passed on to whoever is the next TA for this course. So thank you so much to everybody who has joined the session in the last few weeks. It was a learning experience for me as well, and I'm really happy to have been a TA for this course. So I'm ending the session, today's session here. But like I said, please do post your questions if required. I will upload an explanation or something on the same channel where I upload my videos. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining.